Hey folks, Barnaby Dixon here. So firstly and quickly, a very good response to the merch launch. Thank you very much to everyone who's purchased something. It really helps the channel. Here's a link if you'd like to do the same. Secondly, I'm going to do almost like a sequel to a video that had a very strange thumbnail about a month or so ago, but did garner some interest. So I've created this almost like a button matrix to interface with a pre-existing synthesizer, this one here. Now this is one that I use a lot with my Puppet performance videos, but it's a little bit tricky because the Puppet can't reach the required buttons to get certain chords. So I was essentially making this button matrix here to stretch the range of the buttons so it becomes a little bit easier. Sorry, it's so blown out. There you go. Now this version is quite different from the one at the end of the first video, notably because I messed up on the first one and made 14 levers. I was only supposed to make 12, but it still didn't work. And this is why. These are levers, you see, they go up and down and the pivot point is fairly uniform across them. The problem is this button matrix is not really uniform. You can see the levers would have to interact with each of these buttons here. We're just talking about these blue ones at a different point. So that means that the lever travel is going to be different for each button. Some are going to have to push like this, some maybe just like that. And the pressure required on each one is going to be different too. Now, part of solving that problem would be if we were able to design a lever that does this instead of that. So I printed this on my excellent Bamboo Labs X1 Carbon, something they sent me for free, but a really, really wonderful device. This is what I came up with essentially. It's a compliant mechanism, but it has 2 points of contact there, see? So you can see it's doing essentially what we want already, but it's a little bit unconstrained and you could break that if you wanted to. So this is the second version that constrains it a little bit more with this triangular shape, so it doesn't really go beyond these bounds. Then I figured, well, why is this part tapered upwards? Because we're not using that space anyway, so I made another one, but instead of using the 3D printer filament, I used something, can you see these things at the top here? I'm laughing because they are dental strips, actually. If you can find something that's strong and pre-existing that you don't have to make and incorporate it into the piece, sometimes it can be practical. However, this wasn't, because these are just too bendable. Can you see this? And they flex in funny ways, and this one has in fact become detached. But this represents something that does work pretty well, especially this one that I was keen to move forward with. So I've now printed something a little bit more complete in the form of this one here. You can see this kind of wiggly thing that's on the end. Let me take it off. So this should give you a sense of how I'm going to try and attach these pieces. Can you see there's this little lip on the underside that I can get that part under, and that makes it a lot more secure than the other one, which was just kind of free floating. Other additions that also break away include all of these things at the bottom here. These are kind of nubs, but the idea is you can fold these out and then break them away, and that gives you a better profile for the button interaction. So if there was a button there that you don't want to hit, now it's a negative space and it won't hit it. Conversely too, you have a button that you do want to hit, you just make sure that these nubs are intact over that part of the button matrix, and with any luck you'll hit it. So I said with any luck, but in truth it required a fair bit more than that. The print went very well, the assembly went well too, and it included some metal elements too. So obviously these metal parts aren't 3D printed, but I've added them to the 3D printed parts in order so that I can create these things. Can you see that how they slide up and down? They're a bit hard to push just with my hands here, but they go up and down. They enable the piece to clamp over that side lip that I showed you in an earlier clip. But what was incredibly challenging about it was on the underside of the buttons. Let me show you this now. So I had to add a whole bunch of these nasty looking blob shapes. A combination of heating elements and gluing was used to stick them in place. But part of the reason that the nubs that I mentioned before didn't work on their own is because you need some of them to overlap in order to hit the button effectively. You know, think of it like target practice. This would have been a little bit off to the side were I not able to have it protrude out a little bit. If you do that, of course, you've got to make sure there's a negative space on the adjacent lever so that this one can move up and down unhindered. You can see many instances where that's the case. So a bit of a miserable assembly process, but it works well. So because the levers sit like this, you do lose all of these chord markers and the little labels there. So this is what I did about that. I did think this was maybe something I could model the text and then emboss it, and then when it printed out it would look clear, but it didn't quite. You can get a lot of detail like that from a resin printer, but not really with a filament one at this point in time at least. So what I did was simply printed it out on a piece of paper, sealed that paper with epoxy glue so that it prevented it getting more smudged and kept it somewhat stable. Okay, let's test all of these chords out. So we got, you'll see them change in the top corner then, so that we have C6, major 7, minor 6, yeah, That was successful, all of them work. These are just duplicates, by the way. Sometimes the puppet has a bit of trouble getting these like this, so we have a duplicate over there. So we don't have to do that. Yeah, lovely. Okay, so I've had a little play with it. I've put it into an external synth here, so the sounds are a little better. But what makes it a lot easier, not just the fact that the stretch is now doable, the fact that there's a tactile element to it now. I can feel the buttons a little better. And that's important because when I'm performing with the puppet, it is on top of the keyboard and I can't really see it past the puppet. So being able to navigate through feel is very useful. And because of that, I'm thinking of doing something with these buttons here too. So I've fired up the Bamboo Lab. It's done the first layer there. And this is just going to be a simple overlay, I think. You don't need to do anything complicated with levers, I don't believe. You know, the buttons are easy enough to push now that the stretch element is eliminated. But yeah, something to create an extra variety in tactility so that I can feel my way around a little better. Okay, let's see. Ah, look how close we were. Okay, second try. Look at the speed of this thing. Yes! Woo! So to further clarify, this is kind of smooth and these are kind of smooth, but this texture here, you can probably see from the print bed, is a little bit rough, and that just gives me enough tactile information to give me a sense of where I am. So I don't have too much feeling on the fingers of my left hand here. I play guitar and the tips have some pretty heavy calluses, but on my right hand, I have a little bit more, so this should work. Shut up! Okay. They sat together in the park as the evening sky grew dark. She looked at him, he felt a spark tinkle in his bones. It was then he felt alone and wished that he'd gone straight and looked out for a simple twist of fate. I think that was okay, just a short one.